Men today are trapped, confused by desire, deceived by illusions, and weakened by dependence. But what if I told you that the real problem is not them, but what lies unrecognized within you? Today, we confront a painful truth, the psychological trap most men fall into when it comes to women, and why ignoring this will always lead to disappointment, manipulation, and emotional chaos. In the realm of the unconscious, there exists a force that governs far more of our emotional world than we dare to admit: the shadow. It is everything we refuse to see in ourselves. Every impulse we've disowned, every desire we've buried, and every flaw we've projected outward. When a man encounters a woman, particularly one who captivates his attention, what he believes is attraction is often something much deeper and far more dangerous. He is not simply drawn to her, he is drawn to what she represents in his unconscious mind. She becomes a canvas upon which he paints the colors of his own psychological fragmentation. The process is rarely recognized, yet it plays out endlessly. A man meets a woman and feels overwhelmed by what seems like divine magnetism. He tells himself it's chemistry, destiny, or even love at first sight. What he does not see is that this overwhelming feeling is the eruption of his shadow into his conscious mind. Through her, she becomes a mirror reflecting the traits he has long suppressed. The admiration he feels is not rooted in who she truly is, but in what she symbolizes within him. This is projection, the unconscious act of displacing internal content onto another. In this case, most men unconsciously project their disowned traits, both light and dark, onto women. A woman becomes alluring because she embodies the vitality, softness, or freedom he has repressed in himself. But she can also become threatening, manipulative, chaotic when she begins to symbolize the very parts of himself he fears: emotional unpredictability, seduction, or vulnerability. Thus, she becomes either an angel or a demon in his eyes, never a human being. This binary perception stems from the inability to reconcile with the shadow. The shadow doesn't just contain the grotesque. It holds the gold as well, the creativity, power, and desire we've never dared to integrate. The man who sees a woman as too good to be true often doesn't realize he's looking at a psychological reflection of his inner potential, locked away and guarded by shame. Similarly, the man who believes women are inherently deceptive or cruel is still battling with a projection of his own emotional wounds. In both scenarios, the woman herself is irrelevant. She merely triggers the activation of these deeply buried psychological contents. Complicates the matter is that projections feel incredibly real. They are not illusions in the way dreams are. They manifest in behavior, attraction, obsession, and even rage. When a man falls for a woman he barely knows, it isn't because he sees her, but because he sees through her, unknowingly encountering his unlived life. She becomes a portal into his own unconscious. If he remains unaware of this, he will endlessly chase, or fear, women who activate these hidden forces in him, calling it fate, misfortune, or incompatibility, without ever understanding the deeper mechanism at work. This is not to say that projection is inherently evil. It is the psyche's way of revealing what remains undeveloped within us. But if unrecognized, it becomes dangerous. A man who idealizes a woman will place her on a pedestal she never asked to stand on, only to later resent her for not living up to the fantasy. Likewise, a man who demonizes a woman may blame her for the very emotions she awakens in him. Emotions that belong to him alone. This split between reality and projection not only damages relationships, but perpetuates cycles of misunderstanding, hurt, and emotional dependency. The psychological danger of projection is most apparent in romantic obsession. When a man cannot stop thinking about a woman who barely knows him, it's not because she is uniquely special, but because she holds symbolic power over an unmet part of himself. Her rejection wounds him not just as a personal slight, but as a deep rupture in his inner world. He feels invalidated not by her decision, by the collapse of his projected image. What dies in these moments is not love, but illusion, and that death feels like ego death, a violent dismantling of his inner structure. The only path out of this trap is brutal honesty. A man must ask, what is it about her that draws me in so deeply? What parts of myself do I see in her? What emotions does she awaken in me that I cannot source internally? Until these questions are asked, he will continue to stumble in the dark, confusing fantasy with connection, and projection with love. The woman will serve as a revolving mirror, reflecting back his disowned self, until he has the courage to look inward and own it. Within the male psyche resides a powerful archetype, an image not of flesh and blood, but of spirit and soul. This is the anima, the inner feminine that exists in every man, shaped by his early experiences with women, especially the mother, and further molded by culture, emotion, and unconscious desire. The anima is not merely a symbolic figure. It is a living psychic force, often unrecognized, but continuously active. For the man who does not confront and understand this inner image, it becomes the lens through which he views all women. What he sees in the outer world is not the woman before him, but the projection of this internal figure, veiled in illusion. When a man is ruled by his unconscious anima, he does not fall in love with a woman. He falls in love with an idea. She becomes the embodiment of his psychic yearning, the fantasy of wholeness he has not yet achieved within himself. She appears mystical, ethereal, almost supernatural. He places her on a throne made of his own longing, believing she will fill the void he refuses to face alone. The anima does not grant peace when projected outward. It distorts, it seduces. It leads a man not toward union, but toward dependency, confusion, and inevitable disillusionment. The anima illusion is seductive precisely because it offers what the man lacks. It promises to complete him, to make him feel again, to restore his sense of purpose or identity. But what he does not realize is that the anima is not meant to be found in another. It is a psychic guide, calling him inward. The woman who seems to embody everything he dreams of is not the answer. She is the trigger. She activates the anima, not because she possesses divine qualities, but because she fits the shape of the man's internal blueprint for the feminine. This makes her irresistibly magnetic and dangerously misunderstood. In its immature form, the anima acts like a siren. She leads the man away from reality, away from reason, and into emotional dependency. The woman becomes not a partner, but a symbol of salvation. He begins to believe that without her, he is nothing. She becomes the source of meaning in his life. Her smile gives him confidence. Her rejection shatters his will. This is not love. It is psychological possession. He is no longer seeing her as she is. He is consumed by his own anima. This dynamic plays out in countless ways. A man may idealize a woman to the point of blindness, ignoring obvious incompatibilities, overlooking manipulation, or even accepting humiliation. He becomes obedient to a fantasy. Conversely, if the anima takes on a negative form, shaped by maternal wounds or rejection, the man may begin to fear, distrust, or even resent women altogether. In both expressions, the woman is never truly seen. She is only ever a symbol, either exalted or condemned through the veil of the anima. The most dangerous consequence of the anima illusion is the emotional chaos it breeds. When the woman fails to live up to the unconscious script, the man is thrown into crisis. He accuses her of changing, of deceiving him, of not being who he thought she was. But the truth is that she never was that person to begin with. She was merely playing a role in a drama written by his unconscious. Her failure is not real. It is the collapse of his projection. And in that collapse, the man feels betrayed not by her, but by the illusion he himself created. The journey toward psychological maturity demands that a man withdraw this projection and confront the anima within. He must recognize her voice as his own internal whisper, not the words of a lover. He must come to see that the intensity he feels towards certain women is often a reflection of how deeply he has ignored his inner life. The anima is a teacher, not a soulmate. She appears in dreams, fantasies, emotional highs and lows, all to lead the man back to himself. If he insists on finding her in the arms of a woman, he will always be lost. He will fall in love again and again, but never truly connect. He will search for completion in bodies, in glances, in fleeting moments, never realizing that what he seeks is buried within. Many relationships collapse under the weight of the anima illusion. The man, so entranced in the beginning, becomes disillusioned, cold, or even hostile when reality emerges. He feels betrayed by the woman, but in truth, he has betrayed himself by refusing to see the difference between inner symbol and outer person. And when the illusion dies, he may seek another woman to project onto, repeating the cycle endlessly, always running from the confrontation with the anima he refuses to make. There is a silent epidemic among men that festers beneath the surface of relationships, ambition, and identity. An unspoken dependency on external validation, particularly from women. It is not obvious at first glance. It masks itself as charm, confidence, and romantic pursuit. But beneath this surface often lies a profound psychological void, a hunger for affirmation that originates not from love, but from lack. A man who does not know himself will always seek himself through the eyes of another, and most often, he turns to women to reflect back the worth he cannot yet claim from within. This dependency is not born out of weakness, but of conditioning and psychological fragmentation. From early life, many boys are taught, whether directly or through subtle cues, that their value is measured by how desirable they are to the opposite sex. They internalize the belief that success, masculinity, or even maturity are confirmed through female attention. The boy grows into a man, but the need lingers, mutated, disguised, but unresolved. He begins to associate love not with mutual growth or truth, but with affirmation. He does not ask, "Do I love her?" but rather, "Does she see me?" And even deeper, "Can she make me feel like I exist?" In this unconscious search, the man often believes he is pursuing connection. But in reality, he is seeking identity. Each romantic encounter becomes less about the woman herself and more about what she symbolizes: worth, approval, power, desirability. He becomes emotionally invested not in who she is, but in what she reflects back to him. The danger lies in the fact that this reflection is fleeting. It cannot be sustained. No woman, regardless of her love or devotion, can permanently fill the emptiness left by an undeveloped self. This creates a cycle of dependence. The man feels alive when he is desired, validated, or admired. He attaches his emotional state to the response of the woman. When she is warm, he feels whole. When she is distant, he collapses inward. His inner world is at the mercy of external fluctuation. He becomes anxious, reactive, and even controlling, not because he is dominant by nature, but because he fears losing the emotional mirror that tells him he matters. What he truly fears is not rejection, but erasure. In relationships, this dependency manifests in subtle but corrosive ways. The man may become overly agreeable, abandoning his own needs to maintain peace and affection. He may avoid conflict, not out of wisdom, but out of fear that disagreement will sever the source of his validation. He may mold himself into what he believes the woman wants, becoming a psychological chameleon, always shifting, never rooted. Over time, he resents her not for what she does, but for the false self he has created in order to keep her. His love turns into frustration, not because she has changed, because he has lost himself in the pursuit of being seen. The deeper tragedy lies in the illusion that this kind of emotional servitude will earn love. True love cannot emerge where there is no authenticity. A man who sacrifices his essence for attention receives something in return. It is not intimacy. It is conditional approval. And the more he craves it, the more he becomes enslaved to it. This internal fracture weakens not only his relationships, but his spirit. He becomes dependent on messages, texts, compliments, sexual access, all as proxies for emotional security. And the moment they are withdrawn, his sense of worth begins to unravel. This dependency is further amplified in the age of social media and digital gratification, where the line between affirmation and addiction is thin. Many men now measure their desirability by likes, views, and online interactions, creating a pseudo-reality where they chase shadows of approval that disappear the moment they are touched. The woman is no longer even necessary in physical form. Her digital image, her attention, her validation becomes the drug. But like all drugs, the high fades, and the withdrawal reveals the same emptiness that began the cycle. The truth beneath this dynamic is that no external validation can replace inner authority. The man who depends on women to feel worthy is a man who has not yet looked inward long enough to find substance. He is emotionally starved not because he is unloved, but because he has not fed himself. And as long as he avoids this confrontation, he will be drawn to women not as companions, but as saviors. Each new relationship will begin with a burst of emotional oxygen, only to end in suffocation when the illusion collapses. There exists within the male unconscious a persistent, often unspoken fear, not of women themselves, but of what they represent in the deepest layers of the psyche. This fear is not based on physical strength or confrontation, but on something far more elusive and penetrating: the feminine power. The kind of power that is emotional, intuitive, magnetic, and transformational. This is not a power that seeks domination but one that exposes. It reveals what is hidden, unsettles the ego, and penetrates into the vulnerable crevices of the soul where the masculine facade has built its walls. And it is precisely this kind of power that most men are unequipped to face. The feminine in its archetypal form is not soft, submissive, or passive as culture often portrays. It is wild, mysterious, deeply emotional, and terrifying in its unpredictability. To the man who has not confronted his own inner world, this energy feels like a threat. The unpredictability of emotion, the depth of intuition, the way the feminine seems to see into him, all strike at the heart of his internal insecurity. It is not the woman who threatens him, the confrontation with parts of himself he has never dared to feel, sadness, vulnerability, confusion, even awe. Throughout history, the feminine has been both worshipped and demonized. She has been portrayed as both divine and dangerous, goddess and temptress, healer and destroyer. These polarities are not accidental. They reflect the male psyche's inability to integrate the complexity of feminine energy. The masculine tendency is to categorize, to control, to define. But the feminine refuses containment. It moves in spirals, not lines. It speaks in symbols, not logic. It invites surrender, not conquest. And for the man who clings to control as his source of strength, this invitation feels like annihilation. The fear becomes especially apparent in emotionally intimate relationships. A woman's emotional depth can feel overwhelming, even suffocating, to a man who has not learned to hold space within himself. He may accuse her of being too much, too emotional, too chaotic. But what he's really saying is, I don't know how to meet this part of life within me. Her presence, especially when unfiltered and real, becomes a mirror that reflects his emotional illiteracy. And rather than admit this, he distances, criticizes, or even tries to control her to avoid facing his own discomfort. This fear is not only emotional, it's also spiritual. The feminine is connected to mystery, intuition, and the unknown. It represents the depths of the unconscious, the waters beneath the surface. To engage with her is to lose the false safety of certainty. It is to dive into feeling without knowing where it will end. Many men, conditioned to prize logic, achievement, and linear progress, find themselves internally collapsing when asked to feel without solving, to be without doing. They want answers, and the feminine offers questions. They want paths, and she offers presence. She does not lead them forward. She draws them inward, and this is terrifying to the man who has built his identity on external validation and mental clarity. As a result, the reaction to this fear is often to reduce the feminine, to tame it, shame it, suppress it. Men may seek out women who are emotionally dormant, who do not challenge them or stir their depths. They may reward superficiality, confuse silence for peace, and label emotional expressiveness as weakness or instability. In doing so, they avoid the feminine not just in women, but in themselves. They deny their intuition, repress their emotions, and cut themselves off from their own capacity for transformation. They mistake suppression for strength, not realizing that what they fear is not chaos, but the death of their ego. This fear also breeds subtle resentment. A man may feel drawn to a woman's energy, beauty, and emotional richness, yet simultaneously hate the power she holds over his inner world. He becomes trapped between desire and resistance, admiration and mistrust. He may worship her in fantasy but diminish her in reality. He may be fascinated by her mystery, yet feel emasculated by her emotional depth. This inner contradiction erodes his clarity and makes true connection impossible. He cannot love her fully because he does not trust the part of himself that she awakens. To fear the feminine is, ultimately, to fear life itself. For the feminine is not just in women, it is in nature, in the soul, in every moment that cannot be controlled or predicted. It is the dark night that precedes rebirth, the wound that opens the heart, the silence that speaks deeper than words. To reject this energy is to remain cut off from the very force that completes the human experience. But most men do not realize this. They believe their resistance is strength, their avoidance is rationality, their control is mastery. In truth, it is fear wearing the mask of masculinity, and until this mask is removed, until the man allows himself to see the feminine not as threat, but as teacher, he will continue to wage war against the very thing that could liberate him. The deeper a man journeys into his own psyche, the clearer it becomes that the struggles he faces with women are reflections of the battles he has yet to fight within himself. He mistakes illusions for love, validation for purpose, and control for connection. The woman, in her complexity, unpredictability, and power, becomes both the object of desire and the scapegoat for his unconscious fears. But the truth is stark. It is not her that betrays him. It is his own refusal to see clearly, to feel deeply, and to stand fully in his own inner authority. The illusions of idealization, the dependency on affirmation, and the fear of feminine power are not simply relationship problems. They are wounds of the soul. These wounds cannot be healed through seduction, dominance, or even avoidance. They can only be healed through inner confrontation. The man who dares to strip away his projections, who withdraws his hunger for validation, who opens himself to the full depth of the feminine without retreating, this man begins to transform. This path is not easy. It demands psychological death before rebirth. It calls for truth over comfort and solitude over addiction to presence. But in walking it, the man no longer seeks wholeness through others. He becomes whole. And in that wholeness, he no longer fears women, idealizes them, or depends on them. He meets them not as a broken child craving a mother, nor as a lost soul chasing a savior, but as a conscious being, grounded, aware, and awake. And only then does love become possible. Real love, the kind that is not built on illusion, but on truth.